Welcome to Medical Marijuana and Wellness. Today's topic is going to be cannabinoids. We're going to discuss CBD, THC, CBN, Delta-8, and more. Joining me is Amy Green, an RN with MMTC. Amy, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, always wonderful to be here, Marc.
Yeah. This is a subject that you, on a daily basis, when you're working with various patients, you talk about cannabinoids. But in researching this presentation, I found very few people that talked about what a cannabinoid is. So let's dive into what is a cannabinoid. What's interesting is researchers found that cannabis contained a number of active chemical components, actually hundreds of them. And so they dubbed those components cannabinoids. So the question is, who were those researchers? And why don't you take us through a little history of that?
Yeah, for sure. So in 1940, Robert Kane found that there was a um, a molecule called cannabinol or CBN. This was actually the first cannabinoid that was identified. And then 2 years later, we have Roger Adams, who discovered CBD or cannabidiol. Then we go to 1963 with Israeli professor Raphael Mechoulam. He discovered the actual structure of CBD. So that's what a stereochemistry is. It's just the actual physical structure of it. And then a year later, they identified the stereochemistry of the THC molecule. So they're just building on the research that has already been done.
And this is very interesting because what it really points out is in the 40s, they discovered cannabinoids, but it wasn't until really the 60s that the idea of the endocannabinoid system and the discovery of the endocannabinoid system came out. So we discovered cannabinoids before we discovered the endocannabinoid system that was out there. And I think that's very fascinating to point out. Now, again, in discovering what they are, tell us what these active components are and what they do.
Yeah, so scientists were trying to figure out how these chemicals that they were finding from the cannabis plant were actually interacting with the body. And so they found that it was interacting with a series of receptors in the body, and it's through neurotransmitters. So these receptors belong to the body's complex nerve system, which uses neurotransmission to send and receive signals from the brain to the rest of the body. This is part of your nervous system. And then by interacting with these receptors, cannabinoids were essentially influencing the brain's normal communication routes.
So this is very natural. In other words, the natural body function. Your body's using endocannabinoids to really heal itself. This has to go back to those you mentioned, what they call signal transduction, where what's happening is the actual cannabinoids are triggering cells in the body.
They are, yeah. So cannabinoids are going to attach to the receptor. And then when they attach to that receptor, they are causing a reaction. This is going to be a positive reaction, a negative reaction, or an inverse reaction. So an agonist, which is it's going to connect to the receptor and produce a response. An antagonist, meaning it's going to attach to the receptor and block a response, or it's an inverse agonist, which means that it's going to connect to the receptor and produce the inverse effect of the agonist.
And these are natural body functions. This is what your body does naturally.
Absolutely. This is what your body is doing every day. And when we're introducing cannabinoids from the T8 or the cannabis plant, we are supplementing a naturally occurring system in our body.
Right. This is a natural process. And that's what's really important. You're talking about something that the body is used to working with and identifying with. Now, it wasn't until 1992 that really the molecular structure of cannabinoids were really, let's just put it this way, made popular. In fact, it really came from an article that was published in 2018 with a Journal of Molecular Science, where researchers brought out and really named endocannabinoids.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about this is obviously endo means within. So this is our naturally occurring system within the body. We just didn't really have a name for it, but we knew that cannabinoids were interacting with our body somehow. But now as we're building on this research, we're finding different names for things, or we're naming different processes that are already occurring.
It's interesting that in 1992, they discovered cannabinoids and it had an effect on the body. And it wasn't until 2018 that they could actually demonstrate or identify these endocannabinoids, which the body is producing, which is really, really important, because now we know that the endocannabinoids really help our body stay in homeostasis. We'll talk about that in a moment. But more importantly, phytocannabinoids from the plant come in and actually work with your body and help to replace and actually replenish a lot of those endocannabinoids. And I think that's really, really important to identify and understand. That's the magic of cannabis.
It is, yeah. And so cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, they look and they act like the naturally occurring endocannabinoids in the body. And then these compounds are having a reaction, and that is going to affect behavior, mood, coordination, and a lot of other different systems and processes within the body.
Yeah, I put this chart over here. It'll be available if you go to our website, you go to our YouTube channel, you can download it. But I think it's just important to point out there's been a lot of research done, and it shows that the endocannabinoid system really works throughout our whole body. So the question becomes, why is cannabis such a big deal? And what I always try to look at is, we all know that we have a nervous system. We've been taught that since we were young. And I tend to look at the nervous system as the cell phone system of the body. This is where your body communicates to itself. If you hurt your finger or your knee, you have some intestinal issues, a signal is sent to your brain that says, Houston, we have a problem. And we've known about that for a long time. Really, it wasn't until they started studying cannabis, and more importantly, that we identified the endocannabinoid system, that the connection could be made between when you said, Houston, we had a problem, how your body actually managed that particular problem. And this endocannabinoid system is really, really critical to keeping your body really in homeostasis or in balance.
Absolutely, yeah. Because the endocannabinoid system occurs naturally throughout our entire body, it's actually interacting with a lot of different systems, including systems that regulate pain, anxiety, memory, appetite, inflammatory responses, and other immune system responses as well.
Yeah. Now it's important. It's important to point out, this is something that it just came out really in the Journal of Medicine in 2018. It was identified in 1992. Many doctors don't know or weren't taught and don't understand the endocannabinoid system. Not that they don't want to, it's just they weren't taught it and they really don't understand it. And that's why a lot of doctors stay away from medical cannabis, because it's an area that they really don't understand. But it doesn't mean it's something that isn't important to you. Now, there are a couple of natural cannabinoids that are produced. One is through the endocannabinoids, which your body produces. And we talked about phytocannabinoids. You mentioned earlier, Amy, that these actually mimic the endocannabinoids and bind with your various receptors.
Yeah, and so when scientists were first looking at cannabinoids and how they were interacting with our body, they noticed that they were virtually identical to the naturally occurring compounds in our body. So phytocannabinoid is just the cannabinoids that are being introduced by the cannabis plant into your body. They're virtually identical. So we're just supplementing the body's natural system.
And you might say, why would I do that? Well, I'll take myself as an example. I'm a senior citizen. I don't produce as many endocannabinoids as I did in the past and when I was younger. And more importantly, I don't produce them as quickly. So when I have pain, I have inflammation, injuries, it's important that I give material to my body, the phytocannabinoids, to give it the resources it needs to be able to address and keep my body in homeostasis. So really, I mean, I had one doctor tell me that anybody over the age of 55 should be using cannabis to really help your body perform its normal function. Now, there's also synthetic cannabinoids. These are something to be careful of. Is that correct?
They are. So synthetic cannabinoids, one example might be the medication Marinol. Marinol is a synthetic form of THC. And because this is a medication that is approved through the FDA, it does need to be used under a doctor's supervision. And that's the only time that it should be used, is under the direct supervision of a physician or another practitioner.
Right. And really, and one of the interesting things is they have produced cannabinoids to try to mimic CBD, for example, but there's no what they call entourage effect. We'll talk more about the entourage effect. But really, I'm not a fan of synthetic cannabinoids, especially since we have cannabis available to us. But it is something that the pharma companies want to try to patent and control. Let's talk about the components of cannabis. Cannabinoids are part of it, but cannabinoids also have terpenes and flavonoids.
Yeah, so these are just the big three components of the actual cannabis plant. So yes, we're talking about cannabinoids right now, but terpenes are the actual organic compounds that give the cannabis plant, its smell and its taste. And terpenes are also going to be what's providing a lot of the benefits of the plant. For example, linalool, also found in lavender, is really great for relaxation. So when found in the cannabis plant, that's one of the effects that that terpene would have on the body, is a more relaxing sensation. Now, flavonoids, very similar to terpenes, they're going to they're going to contribute to the color, aroma, taste of the cannabis plant, and they're going to be providing many of the same or similar benefits. Flavonoids also include antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and other disease prevention properties as well.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is cannabinoids identify and work with various receptors of your body. When you say work with, what does that mean? It means introducing the terpenes and the flavonoids, which bring the medical value that's there. Think of it like a flower that's opening up and you're putting the nectar inside. That's pretty much what you're talking about here, is a process of that happening. And those three together cause something called the entourage effect. And I tend to look at the entourage effect is when you're using, for example, CBD and THC together, you get a better effect than using either CBD by itself or THC by itself.
Certainly. And that's actually a really great example of cannabinoids working together. Additionally, terpenes can also enhance some of the effects of certain cannabinoids. Um, and like it says, CBD can lessen the psychoactive effect or the feeling of the psychoactive effect of the THC cannabinoid.
Mm-hmm. And also, what's interesting about the entourage effect is because your body has been told, Houston, I have a problem, your mind, your brain knows you have a problem, and it will produce endocannabinoids to address that particular condition. Now, how does that affect us? I know that in the case of my mother, she had cancer. She's in remission right now. But what's interesting is while she was taking cannabis to be able to address that, she found out that her glaucoma went away. Her body knew that she had a problem and it produced the endocannabinoids for that. So your body will not only address the particular condition that you're using it for, if it finds some other problems, it'll actually help in those particular areas as well. And that's one of what I call the magic of cannabis. Now, there are over 200 cannabinoids that have been identified. There's over 120 that are being studied, but really the main cannabinoids are the ones you see here, the CBDs, THCs, THCAs. We're going to talk about these particular set of cannabinoids because this is the main players that you're going to find in medical cannabis. Amy, tell me, what's the current use for cannabinoids?
Yeah, so we're finding a lot of use for cannabinoids, alleviating pain and inflammation, especially in chronic forms of diseases like arthritis, fibromyalgia, endometriosis, glaucoma, neuropathy, and Crohn's disease. But there are also cannabinoids that can help with appetite, which is extremely important when patients are having weight loss associated with AIDS, cancer treatment, or chemotherapy treatment. Cannabinoids can also help improve muscle control and lessen spasticity for patients that are suffering from Parkinson's disease or Huntington's disease. Um, Definitely, we have found that there's a lot of really good evidence that cannabinoids can help with controlling epilepsy or other seizure disorders. And especially a lot of research has been done with children specifically. Cannabinoids can also or have been shown to help with the treatment of mental conditions, including post traumatic stress, bipolar, and anxiety disorders. A lot of times when we see cannabinoids treating mental illness, it is helping people just kind of level out. Which is super important, especially for somebody that does maybe have bipolar or an anxiety disorder. And then treating addiction, and this does include smoking cessation as well.
So let's talk about some of the future uses. And I say that because here in the United States, cannabis is considered to be a Schedule I drug, meaning there's no research, it has no medical value. However, overseas, they have been studying cannabis. And why are they studying it overseas? Because in 1964, the United States government decided to fund research into medical cannabis. And because it was illegal in the United States, they funded Dr. Raphael Mechoulam in Israel, who literally for the last 60 years has been studying medical cannabis and is part of Ben Gurion University and the University of Jerusalem that has produced a number of studies that are out there. Offshoots of that are things like Dr. Cristina Sanchez, who was one of his students 26 years ago, was built a lab in Spain to study cancer and cannabis, and she's put out a number of research studies on this particular subject. So I say future use because it's illegal in the United States, but she's been able to identify, for example, that cancer helps to put cancer in remission by reducing the size of the cancer cell, if not killing it.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's also been shown to help actually slow the proliferation of cancer cells in certain types of brain tumors as well. Another really big thing that they're looking into research wise is how cannabinoids and the cannabis plant are helping with nausea and vomiting that may be associated with chemotherapy or radiation treatments. Um, and then medical cannabis has been shown to alleviate pain, inflammation without damaging the immune system. So
Right.
research is suggesting that it may be, a beneficial treatment as part of autoimmune conditions such as HIV/AIDS, multiple sclerosis, lupus, or Crohn's.
Yeah, very popular uses for cannabis. So cannabinoids have a lot of medical benefits, have helped a lot of people. Let's talk about how they get produced, and let's talk about the individual cannabinoids, because when you're looking at addressing your particular medical condition, you may want to go to a dispensary and find out if these cannabinoids are in the product that you're looking for. Let's start with CBG. CBG is considered to be the mother of all cannabinoids. It is really the predecessor to cannabinoids being produced. When the plant is first being grown, that little seed first pops out a leaf, the first thing that it produces is CBG. Now, what's fascinating is from there, it then produces THCA, CBDA, and CBCA. And these are A's because they are acids, meaning that they are being produced in the plant itself. A lot of these have, you can see the different properties from inflammation, cancer, pain, antifungals. There's a number of things that these particular cannabinoids produce, and this is when it's in its raw form. Now, once the plant gets either heated or aged, it produces THC, CBD, CBC, CBG. In other words, you're morphing into the other cannabinoids. And then over time, this is where the 120 cannabinoids were being studied really come out and play. And this is where you're, again, with age, this is where your CBNs, your CBD, CBNAs, and your Delta-8s come from. It's kind of an interesting process that goes through. A lot of people believe that the plants, these are just produced when the plant is first grown. Really, it's a matter of heating and aging. And that's really important to use a dispensary that understands this process to produce the proper medical values. Now, let's take a look at, let's start with CBG, the mother. Amy, tell me a little bit about this, because this is one of the most important, this is the most important part of the plant, and that over time becomes less than 1% because as other cannabinoids get produced, but it has tremendous medical value.
Absolutely. So CBG or cannabigerol is like you said, it's the mother cannabinoid. And as this plant is growing and as it's heated, and this can be naturally occurring heat from just sunlight or from grow lights, is morphing the CBGA into other cannabinoids. And then if the plant is heated further, either in production or after it's been sold to a patient, or it's been dried and cured, that's just adding more different compounds that the CBG is turning into.
Sure.
CBG does have a lot of medical benefits on its own, though. It can help with painful bowel conditions like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. It's been shown to help with staph infections, specifically drug resistant staph infections. CBG has been shown to be helpful for glaucoma and reducing the rate of cancer growth.
Yeah, it also has a lot of neuroprotective capabilities too, which helps with Huntington's, Alzheimer's, dementia, and others. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. But what happens is that then produces and morphs into CBG, which is really interesting because CBG by itself is something that is typically makes up not much of the plant, but it is very, very powerful. And as we talked about before, it has a lot of medical benefits. And we went through the medical benefits in the previous slide, but this morphing process is really, really important. Again, that comes again from heat itself. From there, it produces what they call CBDA, and that's where you're heading down this particular area. And CBDA is important because it really addresses and inhibits the COX-2 enzyme.
Yeah, and the COX-2 enzyme is it's an inflammatory response in the body. You actually have a lot of newer medications, biologics, that are purposely targeting the COX-2 enzyme. And so CBDA is targeting that same enzyme that drug companies are trying to figure out how to target. We already have a cannabinoid that we know about that can work with that enzyme. So some of the other medical benefits of CBDA, it's a huge anti-inflammatory. It does have a strong activation at the 5-HT1A receptor, which is a serotonin receptor. So this is going to affect different things in the body, like feelings of mood, feelings of nausea, vomiting, and it's going to help with intestinal regularity as well.
Mm-hmm. And when you have CBDA, once it gets heated, it's called deboxylation, it turns into CBD. But in this particular form, it's not CBD yet. It's just the molecule by itself. And what's interesting about CBDA is it's 100 times more binding in affinity to the various receptors that CBD addresses, meaning it's very, very, very effective. And if you can use, especially for inflammation, if you can identify and use CBDA, it helps quite a bit. Now, let's take a look at CBD itself. This is a very famous cannabinoid.
It really is. CBD is it's currently available over the counter. You can get it from a lot of different places, both from hemp products and from marijuana, which is higher THC.
Mhm.
Um, and the consensus really is that CBD is a very safe compound with no negative side effects. One of the biggest things is that CBD is going to bind to that CB1 receptor, which are normally found in the central nervous system, including the brain, and block some of the THC from attaching to those receptors. So, this is what's producing the lower psychoactive effects that some people might get with THC. So, I always tell patients, if you ever feel like you've taken too much THC, you have an uncomfortable, heady, or stoned feeling, CBD is what you want to take to help bring down that sensation and just make it more comfortable for you.
Sure. And this is where it acts as an inverse agonist that's really there. Very important. Now, let's talk about the medical benefits. You brought out some of them, but it has more medical benefits than just that. I mean, it's really an important cannabinoid.
Absolutely. So CBD it's been shown to have anti-inflammatory, anti-seizure, anti-anxiety, anti-tumor effects. It's also been shown to be very helpful with neuropathic nerve pain, as well as helping with improving spasticity from multiple sclerosis. It's been used in the treatment of opioid addiction. It's been shown to improve insulin sensitivity in type 2 diabetics. It's helping with managing symptoms from ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. And then it's been really beneficial or has been shown to have potential benefits for patients suffering from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and schizophrenia as well.
Sure. And I should mention, and we're going to mention again under the THC slide, CBD and THC working together it boosts the medical benefits of both of those. So it's important to look at a full spectrum CBD product, meaning just a touch, 0.3% or less of THC to really get the maximum benefits out of CBD. Now, CBD also affects receptors other than the CB1 and CB2 receptors, which are associated with the endocannabinoid system. CBD actually works with a number of other receptors that can help your body.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the 5-HT A1 receptor is the serotonin receptor that we already talked about. It also is going to attach itself to the A2A receptor, which is responsible for your inflammatory response and circulation throughout your body. The VR1 receptor, which is responsible for regulating body temperature, but also the sensation of pain in the body. And then the GRP55 receptor, which is responsible for regulating blood pressure in the body.
Sure. So really, CBD is acting as in essence, a super vitamin, and well beyond the endocannabinoid system. It's really helping your body stay in homeostasis. That's why it's been so important. One of the interesting cannabinoids that really is not talked about very much, but is really important, is CBC. CBC itself does not produce any psychoactive effects, but it does intensify, or it does boost the properties of THC, which can bring on some psychoactive effects. But really, it originates from CBCA. This is another one that works with receptors outside of the endocannabinoid system.
It does, yeah. So the TRVP1 receptor is responsible for detecting and regulating body temperature. It also plays a role in pain sensation and heat sensation, or nociception.
Right.
And then CBC also interacts with the TRPV receptors to help break down endocannabinoids like 2AG, which is a byproduct of THC as it is processed in the liver. So it's going to actually help break down that final form of THC in the body.
Right. And this is where you get a lot of the medical benefits. You mentioned, I think what's important is this is where you get a lot of your pain blocking properties that are there, as well as anti-inflammatory. I think CBC is really known for inflammatory and pain blocking, which is really great, but it also helps a lot with migraines.
Certainly, yeah. And it's also been shown to have some anti-cancer effects as well.
Right. So important cannabinoid that's out there. Now, we talked about that morphing process from CBGA into different cannabinoids. One of them is THCA. Let's head into that particular family. THCA is like CBGA, stems from CBG, but it also lacks, THCA lacks those psychotropic effects, meaning that if you can use THCA, you can get a lot of that anti-inflammatory, anti-pain, the neuroprotective capabilities without the psychological side.
Yeah, and that can be really helpful, especially with conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, where you do not want any psychoactivity. You don't want to affect a person's balance, memory, coordination anymore.
Right. And it also acts, and this is because it acts as a neuroprotectant, it provides a lot of medical benefits that can really help with this. It's there. Now, that then morphs into the other really important cannabinoid, probably one of the or first or second most popular cannabinoid that people have heard about, and that's is THC, or Delta-9. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Delta-9 is, when we think of the cannabis plant, this is usually the cannabinoid that people are talking about. This is the one that's going to produce those uh, can be very strong psychoactive effects depending on dose, but it's also going to help block pain signals in the brain. There's a lot of other things that THC is doing as well. So it's going to help with anxiety, diabetes, epilepsy, and other seizure disorders, glaucoma, insomnia, low appetite, muscle spasticity, nausea, poor appetite, osteoporosis, pain, post traumatic stress. And it can help with reducing opioid use, and it's been shown to have benefits for patients with schizophrenia or those that are having symptoms associated with their HIV or AIDS.
Right. So this is really an important cannabinoid. I think it gets demonized a lot because it does, in fact, can produce psychoactive effects, but really, those psychoactive effects really work to help block pain signals and doing a number of things that are going on in your body that are really important. I would not look at THC as a negative. I look at it as a huge positive, especially working with the other other cannabinoids that are out there. Now, one of the other cannabinoids that are very popular is called CBN. That's really associated with something that's more of something that helps with relaxing and sleep.
Yeah, so CBN, it it is mildly psychoactive, but one of the big sensations that people note when they use CBN is a heavy body feeling, a
Mhm.
lot of relaxation, and that feeling is excellent for trying to either relax in the evening, you're just trying to wind down, or helping somebody get to sleep. CBN can be very helpful for that.
Mhm.
It's also been shown to help with treating a lot of chronic ailments, can help, again, enhance sleep or rest quality. It has been shown to actually have pretty potent antibacterial properties, and has been shown to specifically they were looking at MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which is generally a treatment-resistant bacteria.
Right.
It's also been found to help delay the onset of symptoms associated with ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, and then other neurodegenerative conditions as well. It's been shown to have positive benefits for glaucoma, and again, it's a great anti-inflammatory as well.
Right. And I know that a number of athletes look at it for what they call bone growth, both to help their bodies become stronger and also if they have any particular injuries. CBN is one of the cannabinoids that they look at using to really help them restore their body back to its natural state. Now, we talked about the other cannabinoids, THCV, very interesting cannabinoid, and something that it doesn't really yield the same results as THC, but it is something that can really help quite a bit to reduce anxiety attacks, suppress hunger, and enhance bone growth. Tell us a little bit about this, because this also addresses, again, as an antagonist for the CB1 receptor.
Yeah, so it's going to produce usually the opposite effect of what you would expect from THC, which is where you can get some of that suppression of hunger.
Mhm.
Um, it's also going to interact with non-cannabinoid receptors as well, like the 5-HT1A receptor, which is going to affect anxiety, depression, and it can have effects on things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder as well. It's also going to interact with the TRPV2 receptor, which is responsible for modulating your pain receptors, inflammation, and it's also been shown to have anti-cancer effects as well. And then it's been found to have anti-epileptic, anti-convulsant effects, which is really great for treating uncontrolled epilepsy and other
Mhm.
seizure disorders.
Right. Important cannabinoid that's out there, maybe not as popular, but definitely one that you should take a look at if you have any of these particular conditions that you want to address, especially like pain and again, seizure disorders. Now, THCV has a number of medical properties. Take us through that, but I think one of the things is it's also an antioxidant.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about THC being an antioxidant is, let's explain an antioxidant. So that's going to help inhibit or neutralize free radical oxidation within the body, which is going to help with preventing cellular damage. Which, I mean, that's a huge thing. It's going to help prevent cell damage. So THCV can also help with treating Parkinson's, again, reducing severe seizures. Um, it can also help reduce that brain fog that some seizure disorder patients may have after they have a seizure. It can help reduce that brain fog. And then again, analgesic, um, antiemetic effects, anti-epileptic, anti-inflammatory. The anorexic means that it's going to promote appetite.
Right.
Uh, and then
THCV is a very important product or cannabinoid you should take a look at if you have or trying to address any of those particular conditions.
certainly.
And like you mentioned, the antioxidant capability is really the key to this particular cannabinoid. Let's talk about CBDA. Again, not psychotropic, but has a lot to do with, you mentioned TRPV1, which is really talks about body temperature, but that has to do with pain. Is that correct?
It does, yeah. So it's also the part of your system that interprets pain signals, and so it's going to help in reducing those signals throughout the body. So in in kind of the same way that an opioid would block a pain signal, this is going to have a similar effect. It can also help with recovering from memory deficits and neurological deficits. As well as helping to control obsessive compulsive disorder. It's been shown to have potential for the treatment of neuroma hyperexcitability, which is can be part of seizure disorders. And then CBDV has a neurochemical pathway giving it an anti-epileptic, anti-mood disorder, anti-nausea, and anti-convulsive properties as well.
Sure. Important cannabinoid, something that helps quite a bit. One of the things we hear a lot about is something called Delta-8. Now, I'm going to talk about Delta-8 with a word of caution. Delta-8 is found in the cannabis plant. It is normally provided as part of a cannabis product that you buy from a medical marijuana dispensary. And it's really a variation of the Delta-9 cannabinoid. You can see there's just a slight variation. But what happens is that this particular slight variation dramatically reduces the effectiveness of Delta-8 versus Delta-9 about 50%, especially in the psychoactive activity. Now, there's a number of very positive benefits from using Delta-8. It helps with a lot of things related to your stomach, appetite, sleep, brain, relaxation, pain. It has very positive properties. However, this is a huge caution. Delta-8 is not regulated here in the United States, and in the cannabis plant, it's not produced in large quantities. So there's really no control over the production of Delta-8. And I say that because I did a Delta-8 webinar, and I went to 12 different dispensaries selling Delta-8, and I asked them what I call a certificate of analysis. What is in the product? In other words, when I'm buying this thing, what is it? And in many cases, in 10 of the 12, they did not have a certificate of analysis. In other words, there was no testing done on the product at all. That is a huge red flag. I would not buy any product that has no COA. But more importantly, the two that did have COAs, one of them had done the testing that we're normally used to seeing, meaning 2 tests inside their facility and 1 in the outside facility. The third was a test, but it was done on a batch of that product over a year ago, meaning it really didn't identify what's in that bottle. It was just being produced because people are asking for COAs, and that I would disqualify. The biggest problem I have with Delta-8 is it can be unsafe. It has not been tested. There is no state regulations on this, and I would be extremely careful of purchasing any Delta-8 product other than from a medical marijuana dispensary. And again, that has been licensed by a state because they do the testing and make sure that it is safe, that's out there. So again, I want you to know there is a Delta-8 product, but I would be very cautious of that. And I would go to my dispensary, my medical marijuana dispensary, to really be able to buy and to be able to pick up products in this particular area that's out there. Now, we talked about the certificate of analysis. This is really, really key because we've talked a lot about the different cannabinoids. We also, in previous webinars, talked about the terpenes. Are really provided by dispensaries like Surterra. I'll give that as an example. That's the one we're using here. But Amy, walk us through this because this is what shows us what cannabinoids are in the product as well as the terpenes.
Absolutely. So this is actually going to be the breakdown of what specifically is in the product that you are buying. So this particular COA, it's telling you that there is 39% CBD, there's 33% THC, and then it's giving you all of the minor cannabinoids as well, which are still going to be incredibly beneficial. So it's good to know that they're testing for more than just major cannabinoids. So it's going to give you the entire breakdown of what specifically is in the plant that you are buying. And you can see all the way at the bottom of that breakdown, there is Delta-8 THC.
Mm-hmm.
So it is naturally occurring in the plant, but it normally occurs in such small quantities that it's considered a minor cannabinoid.
Right. But here's where you get your THCAs. Here's where you get your CBGs, your THCVs. So you can see everything that's in here, which is, again, we talked about cannabinoids. How do you know what's there? Ask for a certificate of analysis. They'll give you that.
Absolutely. And this is one way that you know that the company is testing their products, and then they're also sending all of their products to a state lab for a third-party test as well.
Mm-hmm. Which is really important. It's not a matter of them testing it themselves. They do a good job of testing internally, but having a third-party verification, I think, is really important. That's out there. It helps also to identify the consistency in the product. So when you buy a product today, because it's a plant that's being grown, the product that you're getting next week or a month from now is pretty close to the same product that's out there. And again, we talk about terpenes in previous webinars. Here's where you find out what the terpene profile of that particular product is over here. Very, very, very important that's out here. Ask for COAs for any product that you purchase. I highly recommend that. Amy, I ran into this a chart that I found interesting, and I really don't want to jump in through. There's a couple slides I want to go through. I just wanted people or viewers be able to see that there are different disorders or different conditions that are been identified, and there are cannabinoids that really identified to help with those particular conditions. These are the ones for eating and for digestive disorders that are here. For example, PTS, stress, for example, anorexia, fatigue, but also it applies to pain and sleep problems, as well as some neurological disorders. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because our as research continues, we're going to continue to match up specific cannabinoids with specific conditions that we found that they can help with. So it's just showing that every like pretty much anything that you can think of is going to be affected by a cannabinoid.
Right. I mean, here's Alzheimer's, here's migraines, fibromyalgia, arthritis. Again, sleep. There's a lot of different cannabinoids that are identified that are here. We can just talk about this. We can probably talk about this for the next 2 hours. But I think this will be provided in as a link in the YouTube video as well as in our webinar. But you can see there's a lot of different conditions that are being identified that with cannabinoids can really help with. So cannabinoids are very, very important. Amy, we've been talking a lot about this. Let's talk about what the bottom line is. I think there's a couple of things that's important. The first is that it's safe to use cannabis.
Absolutely. There is no dose that you can take that will be physically harmful to you. If you buy a pack of gummies, you accidentally eat the whole thing because they're delicious. Nothing bad is going to happen. You'll have a couple hours of being very tired, very hungry, or having a stoned, heady feeling. All of those things go away with time, and there are no permanent or lasting effects from it.
Yeah. And you find this is where people find a lot of relief from medical cannabis as well. And I think you brought up something earlier about being in control.
Absolutely. You are totally in control of what you take, when you take it, the route of administration that you choose. This is a very personalized product. So, what works for one person is not guaranteed to work for another person. And so, it might just take some trial and error. But that is part of the journey. And it's just knowing that you are in control of your dose and how you use your medication.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out your cannabis journey because the nice part about cannabis is your body, you listen to your body when you're doing your dosing, your body will tell you what's working and what's not working. You don't need a medical doctor to tell you that. Your body will tell you that. In many cases, we get pharma drugs that we take and we get a negative side effect, and the doctor's trying to tell you to take more. It's not necessarily something that you really want to do. I know a number of patients that have that particular problem. You control how much you take. You get to know where your therapeutic dosing level is, and you can actually stick to that. That's really, really important because every person's body is different. Now, the other side of it that's really important is you're not going to get physically addicted.
Yeah, so there is no physical addiction associated with cannabis. There's no physical dependence. Some patients may find that they they become very comfortable with the sensation of not having pain, not having anxiety, not yeah, just kind of they might become very fixated on the positive benefits from it, and when they don't have those benefits, that cannot feel good. But it's not a physical addiction to it; it's more psychological addiction to the results.
I think this is important to point out because I'll take myself as an example. I can stop using cannabis at any time. I use cannabis because I have 7 herniated discs in my neck and 2 herniated discs in my back. That is, I can wake up in the morning in a level of pain of a 7 or an 8. But by using medical cannabis, I'm able to reduce that down to literally to a 1 or lower as far as a pain level within literally within 5 minutes, if not 2 or 3 minutes, because of the regime that I use. I'm able to manage my pain because I reduce the amount of inflammation and I reduce the amount of pain. I can stop at any time. In fact, every 4 to 6 weeks, I take a day to a day and a half off just to let my body reset, let the cannabis receptors start doing their job, really put everything back into more of a normalized state. But after about a day and a half, my neck will tap my shoulder and say, you're going to have pain if you don't do something pretty quickly. And that's when I go back to using cannabis. I'm not physically addicted to using cannabis. I can stop at any time. It's not going to kill me. I don't have any negative effects. I'm addicted to cannabis because I've not found anything better for reducing the pain than cannabis. And I do not want to live with a level of 7 or an 8 of pain. I want to live back down to the level of pain of 1. So am I addicted? Well, I wouldn't say I'm addicted. I do want to use it. And it's something that I will use for the rest of my life, because I don't want to walk around with the inflammation and the pain by not using it. I think the other thing that's important to point out is I don't need to smoke it. There's other routes of administration.
Absolutely. We have several webinars that go over different routes of administration, and it's just finding that route that works for you, that you're comfortable with. We definitely never recommend using a route that you're not comfortable with. So if you've never been a smoker, if you're not comfortable with inhaling anything, then we would not suggest smoking to you, because it's not something that you would use or that you'd feel comfortable using, and that's not
Sure.
beneficial.
Sure, that's really there. So, Amy, we have been talking for about a little while about medical cannabis and cannabinoids. First of all, are there any final thoughts that you have?
As always, please use a journal to log what you're using, how much, how frequently, how it's working for you. Journaling is a great way to figure out exactly what your therapeutic dose is, and how often you might need to take it. Uh, Always start low, go slow. And I really recommend that patients always ask for a certificate of analysis when they're at a dispensary, just so you know really what you're getting in your product.
Right. And a journal, if you look at if the YouTube video that you're looking at, you'll find that down below, you'll find a link to being able to pick up a journal and also a patient information brochure on how to use medical cannabis. Amy, thank you very much for the help. I do want to point out to everybody, there are resources available to you. Please take a look at our Facebook channel, Marijuana Aware. It has videos on the conditions and how to use cannabis correctly. Naturally, we do our webinars, marijuanaaware.com. Please sign up and join us for those. We address a number of different conditions, as well as how to use it for effectively to address your particular condition, naturally on Facebook as well as in the emails. Thank you very much for joining us. Our objective, as always, is to help you get your life back. If one person gets their life back and can get their life back to as close to normal as they can just from watching this video, then we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. Thank you very much for watching.